Hello, Frugal Force. This is Captain Frugal reporting for duty. You know, we've had a lot of praise over the PlayStation 4 exclusive Spider-Man game, and rightfully so. It really deserved it. And it made me want to go back and look at some of the older Spider-Man games. Back in February, I beat Spider-Man Web of Shadows on the PlayStation 2. But after I bought it, I realized that it's immensely different, completely different game. Same general storyline, but completely different game than the Nintendo Wii version, the Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3 version. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back and play the Wii version. And here I'm reviewing that version today in a retro review. So hop on those spiderwebs, sling them out there, and let's swing into this video together.
Alright, Frugal fans, here we go. Spider-Man, a hero that everyone needs but no one ever seems to respect. You know, Spider-Man's had many games over the years, and some of them have been very good, and some of them, well, let's be honest, darn right terrible. Spider-Man Web of Shadows, it sort of falls in the middle. It's a mix of both. You know, before I do get into it though, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell. Leave a comment down below as well as to which is your favorite Spider-Man game and which is your least favorite Spider-Man game. Alright, you know what, let's have a little joke before we get into it too. Here we go. Guess who missed Spider-Man Homecoming? The answer? Uncle Ben. Oh, I know. Terrible, terrible, evil. Alright, let's jump into review. Alright. The premise of Web of Shadows is really interesting since it's a darker side of Spider-Man. The city of New York has been invaded by symbiotes which have been cloned from Venom. The symbiotes have launched an all-out assault on the city, which has resulted in a dramatic shift in Spider-Man's life. Now, you don't start this right away. You get that initial fight with Venom right away, but you don't get the whole breakout of everything going crazy until a little bit later in the game. Now, during the encounter with Venom, he gains the control, again, of the dangerous black costume. This results in the unwanted consequences associated with that black costume, such as mood swings, uncontrollable rage, and enhanced powers. Sort of, you know, like having a prescription that didn't go very well. With these powers, he must take back New York and the symbiotes and Venom by any means necessary. The game even goes a little bit farther. It allows you to choose which role you're going to play. The tried and true black and red and blue Spider-Man suit that, you know, the goody two-shoes, which is the one I chose to play. Or you can go with the less honorable, dark, and sinister approach, going with the black costume. The game's going to let you decide at various points of which course of action you choose to take, and depending on your choices, you're going to get a different outcome. It also tracks which suit you use the most, giving you, did you lean more towards dark or more towards light? Now, there is some elements of this game that really did stand out to me. One thing that really jumped at me was the interactions with the cast that Spider-Man had. The way Spider-Man talks to others. He would make fun remarks about Kingpin's weight. We'd also get to see Spider-Man's personal responsibility impact him and how he reacts to everything. Showing, this complex showing, if you will, shows that the people that wrote this game really did understand Peter Parker and Spider-Man as a character. Now, with that said, let's talk about some of the negatives of this game. Now, I'm not a hater of this game. Please watch the full review to get my full opinion, but there is some negative things that we need to discuss. Web of Shadows' biggest flaw, in my opinion, was the controls. Now, there is some good about controls. I'll talk about that in a moment, too. It had the motion sensing controls for the Wii. you couldn't switch off. You had to use the motion sensing with the Wiimote and the nunchuck. So sometimes you ended up with a Spider-Man that just seemed like he was out of control. You'd perform the same moves over and over again, but sometimes it'd be a challenge because the Wiimote would not accept it. So for example, anytime there was a downward thrust, I could not get it to register unless I was originally holding the Wiimote completely vertical at a 90 degrees. Otherwise, it just didn't want to register it. Now, since it wouldn't always register what it was trying to do, swinging from building to building, which is supposed to be just a flick of the Wiimote, and then pressing the A button later to release, could cause Spider-Man to miss nearest building. It just wouldn't activate. So you'd swing, 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 and you would get nothing, and then you'd land on the ground. Now, the camera view was probably the biggest flaw. It caused a lot of issues for me, especially when you'd want to fixate on a particular enemy that I was not concerned with. So, for example, if I'm going to get some kind of special Spider-Man icon to power up my Spider-Man, and the camera was fixating on an enemy, I couldn't see what was in front of me while I was trying to get away from him. He was really of no concern to me, yet the controls of the camera wouldn't allow me to see in front of me. It kept fixating on that person. So I was making it really hard to get that object I wanted because I didn't need to fight that enemy. And that happened a lot, causing a lot of issues. Now, on top of that, the camera would sometimes, when you're climbing on a building, especially if you're on an edge of it, it'd go back and forth. The camera would go back and forth from left and right. It would really get you lost and where you are on that particular building, making you get up and down, left and right a little bit mixed up. It just flip you out and freak you out a little bit, making it hard to really see where you were. I also had occasions where enemies would get stuck in the ground or stuck in a building, making it impossible to hit them. I also had a couple occasions too where after you do a super move, a super Spider-Man move, he wouldn't actually land on the ground. He'd actually hover above the ground for a little while, causing issues. So there just wasn't any consistency when it came to moving around the city. Besides web slinging, climbing walls was also a bit of a challenge. The game says you can just walk up to a wall and Spider-Man will climb, but he didn't always do that. You'd have to press the Z on the nunchuck to cling to the wall, but it just wouldn't always register. Also, if you were hitting it maybe to zoom or pushing the Wiimote up a little bit, he would instantly turn instead of just going straight. Another issue I had is on sometimes when there was a ledge, Spider-Man would not climb over that ledge. No matter what you did, left, right, he would not go over the ledge. He'd get stuck on the ledge, so you'd have to jump, and he'd jump right off the building. And then the camera would then go bonkers and make it hard for you to figure out where you were. So I found myself on several occasions going back and forth repeatedly in the same place because the camera angle would not shift to where I needed to see where I was going. Now, the game also allows you to upgrade your attacks by earning experience points, but I will say most of these extra attacks did not feel like they were necessary. They just didn't add a whole lot. You find yourself usually doing the same tried and true particular actions over and over again because you know they work. Now, I know I just said a lot of negative about the game, but it does have some good, unique features that did work for me. For example, I just got done complaining about the web swinging problem, but I will say, when it worked well. With that flick of the wrist, you were web swinging. And it really did make you feel like you were Spider-Man. It gave you more immersion. You'd flick your wrist and boom, that web would come out and you'd swing. So when it worked, it was wonderful. I also like that you unlock different suits, even though they really didn't make any changes in the character other than visually. The game also has multiple endings based on decisions you made. And as I said earlier, I chose to be the goody two-shoes. Now, with having the different choices that you make, it could add more replayability for you. And I'm going to talk about that in a little later. There was some elements, too, that I found a tad boring. The missions tended to be very repetitive. You would meet an NPC, such as Moon Knight, and then you would have to stop a certain amount of enemies, destroy a certain amount of whatever it was, and then repeat this several times. And the numbers got really high at how many times you had to repeat and repeat and repeat. And it's just, you get to the next NPC and it'd be another repetition of the same thing. I will say, though, these repetitive missions were optional. So that is a choice there. They were optional. Now, how does this game really fare? Well, the game was fun overall. You had a good cast of characters. The missions may have been repetitive, but you, once again, did not have to complete them since they were optional. I chose to for the review. The game gave a good sense of character, and the controls, while problematic at times, did give you an additional sense of being Spider-Man. Rather than just pushing a button, flicking that wrist really did. Spider-Man Web of Shadows has a great premise, but it did tend to fall flat often when it came to the execution. What I want out of a good Spider-Man game is clear, precise controls that allow you to feel like you're there. Instead, on occasion, they felt cheap and frustrating when you were fighting because you couldn't target lock the character you wanted. It kept focusing on another one, or a camera would shift so you couldn't see where you really wanted to be able to see. So the controls were really the biggest area that needed some tweaking. What we have now is you turn and then you're turning again, trying to see what you could, and you just couldn't. It ended up being a mess. If you can get used to the controls and the issues that go with it, you'll probably enjoy Spider-Man Web of Shadows. Now, let's put a score on it. GameStop gave it a 4 out of 5, Metacritic gave it a 63%, and eBay gave it a 4.4 out of 5. My views are somewhat similar to theirs. Gameplay, I gave it a C. The unresponsive controls and bad camera are not really a great winning recipe for a great Spider-Man game. They were okay and serviceable often, but those glaring issues really can take you out of the game. The graphics are interesting. I gave the graphics, remember, this is the Nintendo Wii version, a C+. The colors tend to be a bit muddy and dark, which I know were intentional because it fits the tone of the game. But with the Wii version, it doesn't have some of the highlights and glimmer and shine that you would see on the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions. It came out just a little flat. I don't expect to see some amazing graphics necessarily. I mean, I understand there's limitations to the Wii, but it just could have been a little better. I think with a little more time with the shading, it could have really glossed up the game visuals. Now the sound, the voice acting in the game, in my opinion, was really good. It was the proper amount of Spider-Man humor. Whether some people might see it as cringy, I understand the character. And that's the Peter Parker way. Spider-Man would use all kinds of cringe humor to intimidate his enemies, and it's also his coping mechanism. So the music in the game also fit the tone of the game. But it really wasn't anything so wonderful that I'd be listening to it while driving in the car. It was serviceable at most. Now with Replay, as I was mentioning before, with all the negatives, there's still some positives too. Yes, there is multiple outcomes. And you know what? If I played the game and skipped the optional missions, I probably would give the game a second playthrough and go all with the dark side of Spider-Man just to see the dark ending. But since I played every optional mission, by the time I was done, I spent a lot of time in this game and I was done. I was definitely done with the game. So if you want to play it and just play it through and maybe not do all the optional missions, you'll probably be okay to run through it again. But if you played like me and did every optional mission, you probably find yourself pretty burned out by the end and just saying, okay, that was enough of this game. Let's pull another Spider-Man game off the shelf and try another one. Especially if you're like me and you have a lot on the shelf. Alright, well I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, once again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share it with others, share your opinions on this game. Did you like this game? I'm very interested to know your thoughts as well. And once again, if you were to get it, I would strongly suggest maybe not giving the Wii version a try. Try the PS3 or the Xbox 360. I think it's going to be a little bit better with a standard controller, and the additional uptick in graphics will probably make it a little bit better of an adventure. All right, thank you for watching. Until next time, keep it frugal.
The situation is dire, Spider-Man. I will transport you to the helicarrier at once.